Hey guys, my name is Anna. Thank you for joining me today. In this video, I just want to talk to you quickly about how I know when bulk fermentation of sourdough is complete. So if you've tried to make sourdough and you haven't been successful, I could promise you that it's likely because you were following something to the T and it wasn't working for you. Sourdough is very hectic, I feel. I feel like the sourdough groups have made it be like, you have to do it this way and you have to do it this way. But the fact of the matter is that sourdough is so dependent on its environment, and everyone's environment is different. So you really have to learn what to feel for and what to look for when you're following those recipes, and we'll talk about that. But in this specific video, we're talking about bulk fermentation. So bulk fermentation is the time when after you've built your gluten. So, you mix up your recipe, you let it sit a little bit, you do a stretch and fold or a coil fold or something, and you probably do, the recipe probably calls for you to do 3, anywhere to 8, right? So you're doing these stretch and folds, and then it tells you to let it sit for hours, maybe like 4 hours, 8 hours. The problem with following these recipes to a T is they're environment based. So maybe you let it sit for 8 hours and it hasn't doubled in size. So your sourdough wouldn't be ready. So I'm going to tell you these tips, and hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, please let me know. Please comment below. I'm trying to make sure that I'm posting on YouTube because I do tend to skip doing reels because my videos are way too long for reels, but they're long enough for YouTube. So, okay, so like I said, we've gone in, we've made our recipe, we've done our stretch and folds, okay? Maybe it called for 3. Now, what you want to do is after you do your stretch and fold, you want to make sure you do the window pane test. If you haven't heard about the window pane test, it's basically where you pull the dough, you want to make sure it doesn't rip, and you want to be able to pull it to where it's nice and thin, and you could potentially read a newspaper through it. Now, if the recipe calls for you to do 4 stretch and folds, and you still are not passing that window pane test, then do a few more stretch and folds. You want to make sure that your gluten is nice and strong. Now, also, if the recipe is calling for bread flour and you're using all-purpose flour, I can guarantee you're likely going to have to do more stretch and folds than what it says because all-purpose flour has less protein content than a bread flour. If you don't have, or if you have all-purpose flour and you have vital wheat gluten, you can also make your own bread flour. So after we do that window pane test, we're ready for the bulk fermentation phase. And bulk fermentation is where we let it sit and rise and double at room temperature. It's very important that you let it double. Some people will say 30 to 50, and I feel like that's where the rules get hectic again because then you have someone who's like, oh, well, it rose 30%, but then something happens, and then they end up with a really gummy, dense, frisbee, hockey puck loaf, which happens all the time. So a good rule of thumb is just to let it rise 50%. Now, I marked this, but because I've been spinning this so much and turning it and stuff like that, I wiped it away. But it has doubled in size. It was about right here. Okay, so it's doubled in size. If you let it overproof, it's going to be really sticky, really hard to handle. However, if your dough does overproof, please do not throw it away. It's still going to be delicious. Just throw it in a pan with some olive oil, make a mock focaccia bread or some cinnamon sugar, or make a pizza dough out of it. Don't waste it. And just because it didn't turn out perfect, like the sourdough bread you were trying to make, doesn't mean it's not usable and it's not delicious. So some other ways are, because I've been turning it, it's not going to look like this, but typically it would have a nice dome on the top and it would be pulling away from the sides. Okay, next would be all the bubbles. So there are a bunch of air bubbles up top here. You can also see them on the sides and underneath. And that's how I know it's done. So at this point, bulk fermentation is over. It's been about 8 hours. And I'm going to cut it in half because, like I said, this is a double batch. I'm going to cut it in half, shape it, put it in my floured bannetons, stick it in the fridge for at least 6 hours. I'm going to do it overnight, and then I'll bake these in the morning, and they're going to be so good. But I hope that helps you get rid of the follow this recipe to a T sort of deal and actually teach you guys what you're looking for. If you have any questions, let me know. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will talk to you guys soon.